Welcome back to This Day in Sports History, a member of the Sports History Network, and you can find more info and more sports podcasts at sportshistorynetwork.com. This is Steve White, your host for another trip around the memory cul-de-sac. It's July 24th, and on this day in 1983, a little too much pine tar led to a lot of mayhem. It was the Kansas City Royals playing on the road in New York at Yankee Stadium. When George Brett came to the plate in the top of the ninth inning, his Royals were trailing 4-3. There were 2 outs, and UL Washington was on first base. Yankee closer and future Hall of Famer Goose Gossage was on the mound, ready to put the finishing touches on this game. But his fastball was a little up and out over the plate, and Brett hit all of it. It sailed into the right field seats for a 2-run home run and gave KC a 5-4 lead. In the Yankees dugout, manager Billy Martin thought something looked a little bit funny about George Brett's bat, so he went out to have a talk with home plate umpire Tim McClelland. Martin pointed to the pine tar on the bat. McClelland called over the other guys in the crew that day, and he conferred on the legality of the bat. The rule at that point was 1.10c that stated the bat handle, for not more than 18 inches from its end, may be covered or treated with any material or substance to improve the grip. McClelland walked back to home plate and he laid the bat down. Baseball's home plate is 17 inches across. The pine tar went way more than an inch past the plate. He picked up the bat, looked to the Royals' dugout, pointed, and then called Brett out. No home run, game over. Yankees win 4-3. But that's when Brett exploded out of the dugout, waving his arms and running right at McClelland.
They might be going to call George Brett out.
Well, he is. He's out.
Yes, sir.
Brett is out. Look at this. Brett is out. And
he's steaming mad.
He is out and having to be forcibly restrained from hitting plate umpire Tim McClelland. And the Yankees have won the ball game 4-3. Brett is called out for using an illegal bat or with the illegal substance on the bat.
Like I said, I have seen this before, Frank, and Gaylord Perry just took the bat away from home plate umpire Jim McClelland. He's going to take the bat. They're going to take it so they cannot take it into the American League office.
And I'm going, well, if they call me out for using too much pine tar, I've never heard of that rule. I'll run out there and I'll kill one of those SOBs. And as soon as I said that, Tim McClelland turns around and starts looking for me in the dugout. And when I saw the video, I was amazed at my reaction.
Now, you heard the announcers point out that Gaylord Perry took the bat and handed it to the bat boy to take it back to the locker room with the intent to clean it up, but a security guard confiscated it before he could do anything with it. But of course, that was not the end of the story. The Royals protested to American League President Lee MacPhail. MacPhail ruled that the bat wasn't technically illegal because it did not violate the spirit of the rule. Now, the original implementation of this rule had been to keep costs down. So if pine tar on a bat comes into contact with the ball, it is going to discolor it, and that ball would have to be taken out of play. Well, here in the 80s, that wasn't as big of a concern as it was maybe decades before. So MacPhail upheld the protest and ruled that KC and New York would need to play out the final out in the top of the ninth inning and then play the bottom half. One of the issues became when to do that. The teams did not meet again in the regular season. August 18th was an off day for both teams, and it was determined that that would be the day of the resumption of this game. And I'll have the resumption of the Pine Tar game in the August 18th edition of This Dish. On this day in 1908, if only they had not decided to move the finish line, an Italian pastry chef would have been an Olympic champion. The 1908 Olympics were in London, and one thing to know is how long the games lasted. The first events took place on April 27th, and they lasted until October 31st. That's 6 months and 4 days. Second, and I'll talk about this a little more in tomorrow's edition, but there was animosity between the U.S. and Great Britain in these games. And third, The weather was mostly uncooperative during that 6-month span. So on this day, it was intense heat in London that was causing some problems. The marathon had been part of the modern Olympics in its 3 previous iterations, but they had been around 25 miles in length. There was not a standard distance for the marathon yet. The London Marathon would be 26 miles, 385 yards, because the race started on the lawn of Windsor Castle to give the royal grandchildren something to watch, and ended in the stadium at Shepherd's Bush. The extra 385 yards was added to do 1 lap around the track and finish in front of the royal box. And just a note, while this is the accepted distance for marathons now, this length did not become standard immediately after the 1908 Games. It would not be until 1921 when 26.2 would be recognized as the standard distance. Now, the race started at 2:30 in the afternoon on one of the hottest and most humid days of the English summer, and it started taking its toll on several of the race favorites. 55 runners started, but mile after mile, runners pulled off to the side, unable to continue in the searing temperature. More than half would not finish. By mile 20, South Africa's Charles Hefferon led by 4 minutes over Italy's Dorando Pietri. But Hefferon began to slow down. Pietri kept on going, and by mile 25, the place around where the other previous Olympic marathons had finished, Pietri was in the lead. But not far behind him was American runner John Hayes. Pietri picked up his pace. At mile 26, Pietri entered the stadium but was visibly disoriented. He was stumbling and weaving, he turned the wrong way, and when he was redirected in the correct direction, Pietri collapsed in exhaustion. Track officials swarmed to him and picked him up, and then aided him to the finish line with a time of 2 hours, 54 minutes, and 46 seconds. It was later reported that Pietri had received a dose of strychnine in some water that he had consumed on the racecourse. 32 seconds after Pietro had been aided across the line, Hayes finished his race. Pietri was taken to the hospital. Officials conferred and after a few minutes declared Pietri as the winner, raising the Italian flag up the first-place pole. But the Americans protested, saying Pietri only finished because he was aided by British officials. And it wasn't until several hours later that Pietri was disqualified and Hayes listed as the winner. One more interesting fact about this one, Pietri's Odyssey actually inspired Irving Berlin's first hit song called The Rondo. On this day in 1952, it was a family affair of sorts at the Olympics. Czechoslovakia's Emil Zatopek won the second of his 3 gold medals that he would win in the Helsinki Olympics when he beat France's Alain Mimoun in the men's 5,000-meter final, setting a new Olympic record in the process. He had already won gold in the 10,000-meter 4 days earlier, and he would go on to win the Olympic marathon on July 27th. Less than an hour after he had won the gold in the 5,000, his wife Dana won gold in the women's javelin throw, surprising many who had expected the Soviets to actually sweep all 3 medals. It was the first time in Olympic history that a married couple had won gold medals. There had been a few who'd married after their Olympic competition, and there have been several who've done it since, but the Zatopeks were the first to be married and then win gold. On this day in 1966, golfer Tony Lema and his wife were killed in a plane crash, along with a pilot and co-pilot. Lema had just finished playing in the PGA Championship, held that year at Firestone in Akron, Ohio. Quick side note, the PGA Championship was not supposed to be at Firestone in 1966. It was scheduled to be played in Denver, but recent flooding made the course unplayable, and so the 2 venues swapped years. Lema had not had the tournament he'd wanted. He finished 34th. In fact, it hadn't really been the year that he was hoping for. He'd won only once, and that had been in Oklahoma City at the end of May. Just 2 years earlier, Lema had been the golfer everybody was keeping an eye on. He'd won 5 tournaments in 1964, including a win in the British Open. But on this day, Lema and his wife Betty needed to get to Crete, Illinois for a golf exhibition the next day. Instead of driving the 5 hours, they decided to fly, with their destination set for Lansing Municipal Airport in Lansing, Illinois. The plane never made it. Instead, running low on fuel, the pilot attempted an emergency landing, ironically, on a golf course. The plane crashed and skidded into a lake next to the 7th green of the Lansing Sportsman's Club, just a few miles shy of the airstrip. Lema was 32. Just a few weeks prior to the crash, Howard Cosell interviewed Lema, who was known as Champagne Tony. They shared a bottle of champagne as Howard asked him how he wanted to be remembered when his golf career was finished, then thought to be about 2 decades away. But Lema simply said he wanted to be remembered as a decent person, not really as a great golfer. And then he popped the cork on another bottle of champagne and said there's nothing like ending a nice day or a good game of golf with a little taste of the bubbly. Interestingly, Doug Sanders, who I talked about a few weeks back as the peacock of the fairways, said he was supposed to be on that plane with the Lemas, but he finished in a tie for 6th, and that kept him a little longer at the golf course, and the plane took off without him. And on this day in 1915, a sports legend came close to being on a doomed ship. George Halas was a rising sophomore at the University of Illinois. He had been on both the football and baseball teams at Illinois, but mostly as a 140-pound reserve. He needed to gain some weight and build muscle in order to get into the starting lineup, but he also needed to earn some money. So he had taken a job with Western Electric, and he played on the company baseball team. July 24th was the annual company picnic, and the company had chartered a couple of boats to make the short trip across Lake Michigan for Michigan City, Indiana. The SS Eastland was the first boat scheduled to depart. Employees had been assigned to a boat, and Halas was supposed to be on the Eastland. But Halas was running late. The story of why he was late differed a little bit, but either he overslept or he was trying to pack on a few extra ounces at breakfast that morning and had a second helping. Either way, he was late to the dock, and when he got there, he saw the Eastland laying on its side in the Chicago River. The ship had reached its capacity of 2,572 passengers, and as it started to pull away from the dock, people swarmed to the port side, causing the ship to list and then roll over in the water. Many who had boarded had already gone to lower decks, and when the boat rolled, found themselves trapped. 844 passengers and crew drowned in what is still the greatest peacetime inland waterways disaster in American history. Halas was listed among the dead and missing originally. A couple of his high school classmates actually came to Halas's house to pay condolences to his parents, but they were elated when George actually opened the door. Halas was changed by the accident, saying, "The magnitude of my good fortune overwhelmed me. Luck was with me that day." Halas went on to star in the 1919 Rose Bowl, play for a short time with the New York Yankees, and then take over as coach of the Decatur Staleys, moving the team to Chicago. Eventually, that team became the Chicago Bears, and Halas was a big reason, if not the biggest reason, that the NFL became what it is today. But it does leave the question, would there even be an NFL if Halas had been on time on this day in 1915 and been on board the SS Eastland? Time now for today's non-sports Did You Know? Long recorded in ship captains' logs dating back to the 1600s but rarely seen, the giant squid was finally caught on film in 2002, and then a specimen was captured in 2004. It measured 28 feet in length, which is a little shorter than a school bus, and it's on display at the Natural History Museum in London. That's all for today. Make today a great and memorable day in your life. I'll try to do the same, and then let's meet back up here tomorrow for another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.